Hello and welcome to today's webinar, a collaboration between RF Wireless Data and Aranet. Today's webinar will focus on opening school safely with Aranet Air Quality Monitoring Solutions. My name is Ryan Wachter, and before we begin, I just want to say thank you to everyone tuning in live today. I believe we have registrations from about 15 different countries around the world, so whether you have attended an Aranet webinar before, which are very informative, with some of the most knowledgeable minds in the world, or this is your first time with us, again, we say thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. As I said, my name is Ryan Wachter, and I'm representing RF Wireless Data. My colleagues, Lieta and Zigmars, are representing Aranet, and will be jumping on shortly to discuss schools opening and how Aranet can be used as a tool to help keep our kids and teachers safe in the classroom. As a quick aside, as a husband to a teacher and two young children in school, I don't think it can be stated enough that we need to make sure that keeping staff and students safe is of the utmost priority. But first, I'll be opening today with a little background on how RF Wireless and this Aranet collaboration came to be, followed by then giving you a quick overview of the agenda for today. RF Wireless Data is a new division of Heartland Video Systems. HVS has been involved in the broadcast microwave business for over 30 years and has decided to leverage their microwave knowledge and apply it to this new division. To launch into this new adventure, radio frequency wireless monitoring, HVS and RF Wireless have partnered with Aranet and their parent company, SAF Tenica, a trusted microwave vendor who we have worked with for more than 10 years. With the technical expertise of both RF Wireless as well as Aranet, along with always open lines of communication between us, this new venture with a trusted partner continues to grow. And as the COVID pandemic continues to carry on this fall, this brings us to our agenda for today. With only a limited amount of time for today's webinar, Lieta and Zigmars would like to bring you three main talking points. We then will have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you do have any specific questions that arise during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the events page. Our subjects that we'll be covering today are COVID spread and CO2 monitoring, where we'll focus on airborne spread via aerosols and how CO2 monitoring can be helpful in monitoring that and keeping our kids safe. The Aranet AQ Air Quality Monitoring Solution, and we'll be discussing today ease of use, accuracy, cost effectiveness, and cloud functionality. This will also include ways that are easy to install for the users and that do not require big overhauls of existing schools. And lastly, a case study just recently released. It does have a short video that can be viewed on YouTube afterwards and will let you know how Aranet has helped in a school just recently. For now, I will now hand it over to Lieta and Zigmars, who will help with our Q&A at the end, and they will present to you on COVID and CO2 monitoring.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. That was a very good introduction. So let me dive right into Aranet and CO2 monitoring. So first, let's talk about fresh air. And I guess you all know that having fresh air indoors has always been a challenge. But now with COVID-19, this is a particularly critical problem. And namely because COVID-19 is an airborne disease that spreads via aerosols. Now, what does that mean? That means that when an infected person actually talks, sneezes, coughs, or even exhales, they release these small aerosols into the air. And what's particularly dangerous is that these aerosols float. Because they're not heavy enough to just drop on the surfaces, they linger into the air and sometimes for a few hours. So imagine if a situation occurs that a person who's infected is in the room, exhales these infected aerosols, and then leaves the room. Now, what's going to happen is that even if someone comes into the room like hours after that, it might be the case that the infected air is still there. And this is actually a very good graphic that I want to just give acknowledgement also to Professor Jose Jimenez, who also uses this in his Twitter account, and Lindsay Marr, both very prominent scientists who have been very vocal about COVID-19 and the threat of it being an airborne disease. Now, if we understand that what the problem is actually in the air, that it's aerosols that are in the air, now what can be done? The key point to understand here is that ventilation is key. And what happens with ventilation is that what it does is that effectively it pushes out the stale, the infected air out, and the fresh air comes in. And so you have all of these infected aerosols out and the fresh air in. Now, that is all very well in theory, but the question is, now imagine you come into the room. How do you actually know that the air is stale or potentially infected? How do you know that you need to increase your ventilation, open the window, or just effectively, like, how do you know when to ventilate? And the question here, and the answer is very simple, it's actually CO2 monitoring. So to help you understand why CO2 monitoring can actually be a proxy, imagine an infected person. When they exhale the infected aerosols, they also exhale CO2. And now the CO2, that's how the CO2 can be a great proxy for understanding the potential risk of infection. And so it's no wonder also that Professor Jose Jimenez and other prominent scientists have actually said that CO2 monitoring is one of the most powerful and also inexpensive ways to monitor the risk of COVID-19. And what they've seen is that if, for instance, the CO levels double, then also the risk of this COVID-19 transmission also roughly doubles, which to me seems like a very powerful fact and a way to understand both the correlation between CO2 and COVID-19 transmission. Now, if we understand that COVID and CO2 are related, then, and the CO2 monitoring is a solution, it probably is no surprise that we will be talking about our star product, our Aranet 4, which is, we believe, the best-in-class wireless air quality monitor. So not only does it measure CO2 levels, but it also measures temperature, relative humidity, and atmospheric pressure. What's great about it is that it's very good in warning you when you need to take action. So as you can also see on the screen, is it has the color coding, the green, the orange, and the red. So if you see the green, then everything's okay. Now, if you see the orange, that means that you might need to consider to take any action, like for instance, increase the ventilation or open the window. And if it's red, that means you immediately need to take action. So the information is very clearly presented and you know what to do and when. And finally, one of the key features is also that it's super easy to use. It's portable. You can just carry it around. You can set it up. You literally take it out of the box. It works. And you don't need any prior knowledge to actually operate it. It's very simple. In addition to this, I would like to touch upon some of the technical advantages. And the first one is that it's very accurate. So what we use in Aranet 4 is the NDIR sensor, which is the non-dispersive infrared sensor. So that means that that is the kind of the best-in-class sensor that you can use to detect also the CO2 levels. Second is the real-time feature. That means that you can use the Aranet 4 on 4 different time, like data update intervals, 1, 2, 5 or 10 minutes. And what it stands for is that how often will it update the information of the CO2 levels in the room. And finally, the Aranet 4 device is very reliable. So if you put your 2 simple AA batteries in, the battery life will almost extend to 4 years because the device has been designed in such a way that it's super efficient, it's e-ink display, it's entirely just thought through so that it would always be there for you and you don't have to worry. You just pop in the batteries and it will just work. Now, Aranet 4 is actually not just a sensor. So what we found that especially for schools, Aranet can offer a full ecosystem, a full end-to-end solution that starts with the sensors and ends with Aranet Cloud. So the three key components of our Aranet ecosystem consist of the sensors that you place either in the classrooms, hallways, or wherever you feel like you need to measure the CO2 level. Then these sensors send the information to Aranet Pro base station. The Pro base station, what it does, it collects and stores the information there, and then sends it over to Aranet Cloud. And then Aranet Cloud gives you the opportunity to have a full centralized view of however many classrooms or maybe even schools you might have. So if we're talking, for instance, the US school districts, you might even have many schools hooked onto your Aranet Cloud. And then that way you can not only zoom into a specific classroom, a school, but even the entire school district. Moving on, I want to actually give you a bit of a flavor of how this works in real life, because I understand this is all very well in theory, but how does it actually work? So recently, we were working with a city called Ventspils, which is on the west coast of Latvia, and Ventspils City Council decided to install Aranet air quality monitors in all of their schools and kindergartens. So that meant that we installed just shy of 500 sensors and 20 Aranet Pro base stations, and obviously Aranet Cloud. And this was done across all of their 19 schools and kindergartens. Additionally here, we had an integration with our partners Aspired, because they had specific tablets where they also, in addition to our own system, they wanted to display the results. And additionally, also they had their own software that they wanted to integrate our cloud with. And given that our entire ecosystem is very versatile, adaptable, we integrate really well with any of the other systems that the schools might already have. And I'm hoping also that the visual here on your screens very kind of clearly shows you that you have the sensors in the rooms, then you have the Aranet Pro base station collecting the information, Aranet Cloud integration on top of that, and whatever other integration if you want to have that or you don't need it. Now going back to Ventspils, I want to share with you actually the findings that we saw in Ventspils. And the first one was the fact that they were just shocked by how bad the air quality and the CO2 levels can go up to. Especially, I remember this one case that they mentioned that they reached almost 4,000 ppms in one of the rooms. And that was shocking because obviously the guidance, the kind of rule of thumb would be 800 to 1,000, and they had reached 4,000. So even knowing that, even realizing that that is that bad, gave them a pause. The second one was actually something that came from one of the teachers, and she said that she started seeing how the high CO2 levels also led to a visible drop in attention and productivity of the students. Now, this is very much also in line with some of the studies that you can find online. One of them is a Harvard study, and there are a few more that actually posit that a CO2 level or a CO2 concentration in the room can have a negative effect on your cognitive abilities. So for instance, the fact that, the teacher is seeing that towards the end of the lesson, if there's not enough ventilation and if the CO2 levels are going up, that might just mean that, it's not that because your lesson is just boring, but it might just be that the CO2 levels are climbing and the children are losing attention because of that. Next one was that the teachers, they found the CO2 measurements also an interesting way of like a point that they would like to explain to children the importance of fresh air. So they actually incorporated that so that children would have more of an appreciation, more of an understanding of what fresh air means and the effects that it can have on your health. And so I think that's a really good point that we hadn't seen before is that you use this to also start a conversation with the future generations about how important it is. And as a result of all of this, in the early days that we started measuring this, we actually saw that the average CO2 levels, the concentration dropped where we measured it. And that is, again, no surprise, because obviously if you start seeing the actual situation, you're more prompted into action, and you will make sure that the environment that you provide for your children is better. And as Ryan also mentioned, there will be a link provided at the end, and you can also easily find it on YouTube, which is Aranet Ventspil's school study. You will find a video that we posted recently, this week actually, so that you can see what it actually looks like. The teacher also giving a testimonial, and one of our partners from Aspired giving just like an insight of how easy it was to install Aranet in all of the schools in Ventspils. Now moving on, Ventspils is actually not the only city that we work with. Definitely by far it's not. So we work with most prominent leading research centers, universities, schools in both US, Europe. And then we've been trying to kind of like help, especially this year. We have seen many of the schools expressing interest in opening their doors safely. So we definitely have been working also for those of you maybe watching from the US, you might recognize San Diego Unified School District, or you might have heard about it in the Speak Up America, which was a webinar that they gave 2 weeks ago, and they explained how they opened the schools safely, and Aranet was also mentioned. But there are many other schools, and also very happy to explain more of that in detail if any of you would like to have that conversation. Moving on, just to also close off, I would like to share the 4 main points that we've been hearing from our own clients from all of these schools and also outside of the school and educational facilities. The 4 points that makes Aranet a great system for schools. The first one is the clarity of information and the warning signals that allow you to act quickly. It is so clear to the teacher in the room or to the building facilities manager that action needs to be taken, and so they can easily do that. It's not complicated. It's not some data that you need to read. It's right there in front of you. Second is that Aranet is that full end-to-end solution, the full air quality monitoring solution that will help you not only measure but also collect information over time, visualize the air quality data, and help you also draw your own conclusions. Third is the scalability and adaptability. So what do I mean by that? We've seen some of the schools actually starting with just one Aranet 4 monitoring device and then just bringing it into one classroom, seeing how it works in another, just checking it out, seeing how it works and seeing whether that's actually that they would like to implement in their school. And we've also seen full school districts implementing the system in all of their schools. So whatever your size, whatever, how many classrooms you have, whatever your needs, Aranet can easily scale up and down at whatever point. And that's really good for you, because then that means that you can just start with one and then see how it goes. And finally, the plug and play aspect. There is no need to drill holes anywhere. Our entire system is wireless, it's portable, and the fact that you can just carry it around, test it in different sites, test it also in different parts of your school or schools, has been very much appreciated by our clients. So, moving on, I would like to actually kick off our Q&A section, which is where my colleague Zigmars will also be helping us today. So I'm actually going to hand it over to him. He will start reading out the questions that we've hopefully got in our inbox from all of you viewers, and we'll just start answering them, and then it might be a discussion between us, and but if you still have any questions, please feel free to also pop them into the email, and we'll just start going through them. So Zigmar, it's over to you.
Thanks, Greta. So yeah, we received a fair amount of the questions, and we will try to cover as much as we can in this limited time period. So first question we received from a lady named Lisbeth from some Spanish-speaking country. So I don't speak Spanish. I just used Google Translate and translated it, and it goes like this: how often should monitoring be carried out? So, or what's the recommended measurement interval for the Aranet 4 device? Or so, like our recommendation, and which we have like implemented also in the device out of the box, is to measure CO2 level each 5 minutes, and this is sufficient to show the kind of real values or the stable conditions, like what is the normal change in the change process, what is the normal CO2 level. But of course it's possible to set up also device to 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then you also would see more like a trend how the CO2 concentration is changing. But also 5 minutes is fine, and when you receive our devices out of the box, they also have like this measurement interval. So this was a pretty fast and quick question. And the same lady asked also the second question, also in Spanish. So, is there a possibility that Aranet meets the needs of schools in Mexico? So, as far as we know, there are no general recommendations or legislation in Mexico. Maybe if you find something, you can also drop us a line in email or also in this page as a question in question field. But still our devices are used already in Mexico with our partners, so there are some private initiative to put our sensors and to kind of use it to mitigate and minimize the risks of COVID-19. And also our system works like globally everywhere, in the States, in Europe, Latin America. So definitely I would say this is like a match made in heaven. So I would definitely recommend using our system in the schools everywhere, including Mexico and any country, so we could kind of get through this horrible situation.
And Zigmar, do I remember correctly? I think we have a few educational facilities in Mexico that are already using the Aranet system, right?
But this is more like a private initiative, as we have heard that just people or the schools want to keep the children safe, so they don't wait for some general legislation.
Like a government.
Yes. So like government legislation, they try to be proactive to minimize the risks. So they kind of ask us to help them, and we provide our kind of system, and also in this like a centralized way, so it's also easier for them to control all the schools, campuses, universities, like all the facilities. So have the overview of the system. So so these were like 2 quick questions from Lisbeth. Thanks. So then next question, which we received from Jessica. So in English. So what are the standards for indoor air quality, and what is the recommended CO2 level in the classroom? There are, I would say, many different schools of thought, but we kind of support, or we recommend, or we agree with such kind of recommendation that the CO2 level should not be more than 800 parts per million, and on this level the kind of person who is in the room should be informed that the device should give a warning, and if it's like over 1000 parts per million, then some immediate action should be taken. Most probably the room should be ventilated, and this recommendation also is given by Federation of European Heating, Ventilation and Air Conditioning Association, or in this kind of acronym REVA, and their also recommendation stays the same, that all the indoor spaces should be monitored, the CO2 level should be monitored in the indoor spaces, and the monitoring device should kind of inform the indoor present people, if CO2 level above 800 parts per million is reached, and it should give some stronger or red colored or like a critical warning if CO2 level is above 1000 parts per million. And similar recommendation is given by other organizations and also, for example, from Centers of Disease Control and Prevention from United States, and they also say the same, that if CO2 level is above 800 parts per million in the room, then some immediate action should be taken to kind of minimize the risk of COVID spread. So, but there also are like Health Canada and some Minnesota and in Europe, like Belgium has some strong recommendations and maybe even some laws to kind of also on the similar levels, and even more countries are like adopting this kind of way of thinking also. So yeah, but there are different thoughts of school. There are also some older recommendations, but I think this is the kind of the best recommendation we have at this moment, and in the future most probably we'll have a better one, but now everybody kind of more agrees on this one.
So Zigmar, just to clarify that, so 800, watch out, 1000,
yes,
definitely take action.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So next question we received from Matt. So how many CO2 sensors I would need in a regular classroom, and does it matter where they stand in front of the classroom or at the end? So
good question, actually.
Yeah, so like practical.
Yeah, very
That's
fun.
nice. So actually also our kind of opinion, or I would say our recommendation is that to have one CO2 meter per each 1500 square meters. So usually classrooms are less than that, and they are not also divided by some intermittent or some in between walls or some sections. So this is basically also open space. So in most of the cases, one device is okay for a like typical classroom. If the classroom is very big, or maybe it's in 2 floors, then you need more CO2 monitors, but you can always also ask us. We can also give some more detailed recommendation on how many devices to put in some particular installation. But also, of course, there are no little things, I would say, and of course it matters where you put also the sensor, and it's advisable that you put in the most correct place that it's possible. So it's not advisable to put it near the windows, near the ventilation system, near the doors, where there is like a big air change and CO2 level change. So it's advisable that you put it install it on the wall, where we have also special mounting kit, so it's safely installed there, so it's not lost by some accident or something, you know. So and also to have it where not in the at least 1-2 meters from the students or from the children which are in the room, and it should be installed also at least not at least, but recommended 1.5 meter or 2 meters above the ground level. And so in a typical room, that would be some side wall where you install it, and so it also shows the correct CO2 concentration for the students which are in the room. So it's kind of so. And also it's another thing, it's not if there's a mechanical ventilation inside of the room, then it's also not recommended to use it near to these places where it's there is always some air exchange happening, and it will not represent the correct situation in the parts which are more stable in the room.
Zigmar, so I think we might just have, just checking the time, I think that's 1 minute left, so maybe one last question.
This one, the next one is very technical, I would say, but this will
more?
take more time, you know, but okay, I could try to not to go into a lot of details. I'm also like a technical guy. Sometimes I like to go into the technical details. But so we have a question from Hans, who asks how the information is transmitted between sensors and base, and what type of signal is that? Can it be harmful to the children? So it's not harmful for the children, and this is for this networked solution. So where you have sensors, you have pro base station, and it's probably cloud. So for this transmission between Aranet 4 and the pro base station, or like a hub, I would call it, then we use like our Aranet radio, like wireless signal that is in a licensed and free frequency band. It's 868 megahertz in Europe and in some other parts of the world like Africa and Middle East, and 920 megahertz in US, some parts Asia, Latin America, and also this is it is transmitted signal or signal output power is very low. This is like plus 16 dBm, or it's less than 50 milliwatts. So if we compare with, for example, Wi-Fi or even worse, cellular phone, then it's much weaker signal. So, and of course, this is licensed. We have all the certifications. So definitely, it's not harmful to anybody. And also, we try to minimize the transmission of the signal. So to make also not the device also also in that part also more energy efficient, and also that it would not disturb any other devices, it would not disturb children, anybody. So basically to make it more efficient. So we have more questions, but I think we are already over time. So
so I wanted to thank Zigmars, thank you so much for all the questions, and thank you viewers also who sent in the questions. I want to let you know that all of the questions that you've sent in, we'll definitely respond to them. We have your emails because they've come through to our email inbox. So we will just get back to you offline. But thank you so much also for watching. I'll just give over to Ryan just to close this off.
Thanks, Lieta. Thanks, Zigmars. You guys did a wonderful job over there and explaining things. Yes, like Lieta said, if there are any other questions that have been submitted, we will get back to you. Otherwise, make sure to check out www.aranet.com or www.rfwirelessdata.com. And if you have any questions there, there's contact pages. You can definitely contact us through that, and we'd love to talk to you and see if there's a solution for you. Otherwise, thank you guys so much. I know we're a couple minutes over, but we really appreciate you guys taking a few minutes out of your day. And if we have a good reception with this, maybe we'll do another one sooner than later. So we'll see how this goes. And otherwise, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.